Today on Beers TV Reef Facts, we answer, how do I cure live rock naturally? Hi, I'm Ryan, your host of Beers TV. Reef Facts is all about quick, straight to the point answers to those questions reefers ask all the time. Today we answer a pretty common question. How do I cure live rock naturally? Meaning no harsh chemicals or acids. First, there is a difference between curing and cycling, and they are commonly confused. Cycling is all about populating the surface of the rock with bacteria, which will filter the tank. Curing is the process of getting undesirable organics, like dead algae, dead sponges, microfauna, and other undesirable pollutants off the surface of the rock and getting it ready for a saltwater reef tank. Well, in some cases, cycling and curing can be done at the same time. Today's focus is directly focused on curing rock. The three main methods, natural, bleach, and acid curing. Today is focused on the natural cure, and we'll answer three direct questions today. What is a natural cure? When is it appropriate to cure rock? And then how to do it. A natural live rock cure is about what it sounds like, done naturally by dropping some rock in a bin, most often without light, and waiting for the organics to decay. Over time, the dead algae and other desirable organics in the rock will fall off and break down, essentially leaving only organic-free, fairly clean rock behind. This natural method is certainly the easiest method of cleaning rock and getting it ready for starting a reef tank, and done right, a natural cure can also speed up the cycle time later. So when is a natural cure like this appropriate? Well, that largely depends on the type of rock that you're using, with four major categories: actual wet live rock, dry rock from the ocean, mined dry rock, and man-made dry rock. I have direct advice for each type of rock. If you spent the money to buy wet live rock, which is increasingly rare and expensive these days, you probably did it because you want the natural bacteria, coralline algae, microfauna, sponges, and other organisms which come on the rock, some of which will make the transition to your tank and some of which will die. In this case, curing the rock would mean intentionally let some of that die off. In this case, I'll say a vast majority of reefers will not cure wet live rock because they don't want to lose the coralline algae coverage and some of the other potential life in the rock when there's no food source or light. So the big question is, can you cure wet live rock with the light and food source additions? Well, I guess you can, but at that point, you're more or less just running a reef tank at that point, or cycling a tank and not strictly curing. That said, some reefers will absolutely buy wet live rock and cure it in heated, circulated water, but no light. Many organisms will not survive that process, but it's arguably one of the most stable ways to start a reef tank with an appropriate bacterial culture started. No detectable organics or related pollutants, and minimal pests. That said, my suggestion for most reefers who paid for wet live rock and probably want the desirable elements like coralline algae coverage, unless there's tons of obvious die-off that needs to be dealt with, just skip the curing on the rock and move on to cycling the tank and let it stabilize before adding coral. In that case, the organic organisms that don't make it will break down the actual tank and then have to be removed via filtration or water changes, but you can also benefit from utilitarian fish and cleanup crews during that time, but you will keep most of the life that you paid for alive. Next up, if you picked up dry live rock that originally came from the ocean or used rock from other tanks that's been allowed to dry out, I would call curing mission critical. Rock from the ocean or previously used rock has all kinds of dead organics on it, which if not removed will yellow the water, smell terrible, and absolutely add unnecessary nitrate and phosphate, none of which is a good way to start a new tank. So in this case, I'd absolutely cure the rock to eliminate the organics and get the tank off to the right start. Next, dry mined rock. This is by far the most common rock used these days because it's cheap, clean, and readily available. The most common option being Marco's Reef Saver rock. This rock is basically a million-year-old reef made of calcium carbonate and has all these cool holes created in by low pH aquifers in the ground. In all of our tests, we've never been able to detect any organics or any nitrate or phosphate source in this type of rock, so I would not bother with a prolonged natural cure time because it's probably a waste of time. However, I would soak the rock a week or so in fresh water just to loosen up any debris and clean it, but that's about as much effort as most people will put into mined rock like Marco's Reef Saver. The last one is man-made artificial rocks like those used for the BRS 160, the most popular at the moment being real reef rock. These rocks are increasingly popular because they start purple and look like an established tank much quicker. With most of the artificial rocks, I'd recommend soaking the rocks for a prolonged period of time to make sure anything from the manufacturing process is long gone. However, in the case of real reef rock, they clearly state it's been allowed to cure in fresh water for a minimum of 12 weeks before being transferred into the saltwater bins for another 12 to 16 weeks before being packaged. In the case of Real Reef, again, I wouldn't be concerned about organics, and curing might just be a bucket of salt water and giving each piece a good swish before putting it in the tank. Okay, so you heard all that and decided a natural rock here is worthwhile, and most notably because you're using dry ocean-based rock or used dry rock from a previous tank, or because you're using wet live rock and willing to allow some of the desirable organisms to die off in exchange for arguably the most stable form of rock you can start a reef tank with. So how do you do it? The process is remarkably simple. You're just going to soak the rock for 4 to 12 weeks in salt water with no light until all the organics break down. That said, we have some solid tips on where to do it and how to speed that process up. The process can be done in almost any reef-safe container, ranging from the aquarium itself to a Rubbermaid Brute trash can to something like a horse trough. It might also be a good time to do a bit of a double duty and get a large open-top water container, which after the curing process can be used to mix and store salt water. The only real important part is to find a way to black out your container with a lid or any kind of thick black plastic like plastic sheathing from a hardware store. Just try to keep the plastic out of the water itself. I say complete blackout because we want to eliminate as many photosynthetic algae and bacterial pests related to new tanks as possible. That said, it's important that the container isn't hermetically sealed. We need some amount of gas exchange with the surrounding room. Fill the container with salt water and rock, and that's about all there is to it. The process should be completely done within 12 weeks and then ready for your tank. That said, there are 3 main ways to speed that up and make it closer to 4 weeks. First is add flow or some type of circulation with an inexpensive power head. Well circulated water will promote the bacteria to rapidly multiply faster and break down the organics and just do a better job, as well as flush away the already broken down material. Next is heat the water to 78 degrees or so, which is near where you'll likely keep the tank. Bacteria just reproduce and populate the tank much faster at higher temps. Maintaining higher temperatures during the cure will drastically decrease the total time. Lastly, you don't need to wait for the populations to build on their own. You can add the bacteria yourself and even boost the specific strains for the intended purpose. For instance, many reefers use Dr. Tim's One and Only as well as Microbacter 7 to cycle the tank. However, more appropriate for curing is more aggressive strains of bacteria like Dr. Tim's Waste Away or Microbacter's Clean, which is more aggressive scavenging bacteria. In the case of Microbacter Clean, it literally says microbial culture and enzyme blend designed to clean surfaces of live rock. I believe Microbacter Clean is also dormant bacteria, which is more stable and less susceptible to shipping and weather condition than live versions. Identifying the right tool for the right job and using it will absolutely show in the results. In this case, well-circulated heated salt water with a bacterial boost specific to its intended use will not only show in how well the natural curing process works, but also how fast the process plays out. The only other thing I'd suggest is running a bag of activated carbon. This process of breaking down organics can stink pretty bad, and a few bucks of carbon can completely solve that. So I do that as well. So when is a rock curing done for sure? Well, the best way is to test either when nitrate or phosphate stops rising. If you want to be 100% sure, do a 100% water change and then make sure they stay 0. So that wraps up today's question, but we have a great BRS TV Investigates episode on the best method of curing live rock if you want to see some data. And we also have a quick video on how much rock you need for your tank, and you can also click that tab to learn how to get up to $500 in free reefing gear, order refunds, and free carts are just one of the preferred reefer perks.